Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back from the Easter break. We missed last Tuesday. It's good to be back. I've been away seeing family, but I just got back today in Edinburgh. So thanks for joining us tonight. There's no other guests, so there'll be lots of time to interact with the comments. Let's get the comments on a screen. Now, there's been lots going on in politics in Scotland and the UK as ever, so plenty to talk about. So where will we start? Now, we're going to start with, I won't put the slide up yet. I was talking to someone the other week, someone who's in the EIS Union, Educational Institute of Scotland, which is so the really left-wing teaching union. And the person said they'd been on, looking at their training or resources or whatever, and they were saying the issues that the EIS Union was pushing. You can guess what they are, don't you? Here we are. Apologies for this rather rudimentary slide, but this is what the EIS Union has been promoting to its members. They're in favour of assisted suicide. They're saying to their members, don't talk about pupil behaviour. Don't complain about pupil behaviour. They think that's somehow counterproductive or it's picking on the pupils or something. Gaza-Israel conflict, they're very hot on that. On the pro-Gaza side, what that's got to do with being a teacher in Scotland, I do not know. They oppose military recruitment. So I guess I assume they want the UK not to have a military. I don't know how that works. They want peace education introduced into the curriculum. You can imagine what that would be. Can you? I mean, the curriculum in Scotland, in any case, mirrors the values of the EIS already. But they want extra lessons put in called peace education. They want extra effort made to tackle anti-Muslim prejudice, which I'm sure is a problem to some degree in Scotland, but lots of other problems as well, and violence against women and girls. So it's just classic. And the EIS is not it's partly a teaching union, but it's also a sort of hard left political activist group as well. And the problem with that is that influence molds education policy in Scotland. For example, the General Teaching Council of Scotland, they have people appointed to their council or whatever it's called. Representatives are elected to it. And a lot of those representatives are representatives of unions. Officially, they put themselves forward saying, I'm a candidate from the EIS. And then the EIS, I guess, commends them to its members and they get elected. So this union as well exerts a lot of influence over the teaching profession and also over education in general in Scotland. Right, what would I do about that? If I was the First Minister, if I was the Education Secretary, what would I do about that? Well, I think with the GTCS, basically, I would stop people identify themselves as being affiliated with a union if they're applying to be elected to their council. The other things, I think just the government needs to say, okay, you're very welcome to your opinions, EIS, but you're not going to influence education policy at all. Another of our policies with regard to education policy as well is we would abolish education in Scotland completely. Anyway, that's just a little snippet to warm up while the audience is gathering. Right, good evening, Mary. There's just something from Twitter. I saw Jacob Rees-Mogg was commentating on one of the buffer zone stories, and he said the abortionists fear free speech. I would think it's true. That's absolutely true. I think the pro-abortion side of the argument are terrified of open discussion, which is why they want to suppress it every opportunity. And if they can't suppress it completely, they want to keep the discussion on secondary issues rather than the fundamental issue about the value of life. So yes, Jacob Rees-Mogg, you're quite right. Abortionists fear free speech. To be honest, though, I don't think they fear you, because Jacob Rees-Mogg says, I'm pro-life, but don't worry, folks, I'm not going to do anything about it. I'm not going to change the law. And they also don't fear Jacob Rees-Mogg's party, the Conservative Party, because when they've been in power, I mean, just abortion continues unchanged. They also don't fear reform either. I would guess on some of these moral issues, I would guess reform would potentially be worse than the Conservatives. The Conservatives, if it's on an issue like pro-life, you'd probably find a few more pro-life voices among the Conservatives than you would among Labour. In fact, a lot more. Not a majority by any means. The Conservatives won't do anything useful, but there's probably more pro-life people than the Conservatives. If you compare that to reform, I would think there maybe be fewer pro-life voices in reform. That would be my guess. Look at the assisted suicide vote. I know it's a very small sample, but that would be my guess. Time will tell as we see how reform develops. Right, okay, there's another very short story just as we're warming up. This is a bit disconcerting. I mean, how far away is this from where I'm sitting now in my study in my house? This is about, half a mile away, maybe. Certainly well under a mile away. Just over in Oxgangs, yet another gang-related incident in Scotland. There was a house burnt down. Somewhere was that in Edinburgh? There have been issues in Glasgow. So some sort of feud going on between two rival gangs. Not so keen on that. Do you know what can the government do about it? Well, let's get practical about that. I'm sure the police are investigating it very thoroughly. I think the police have got a difficult job on their hands. I guess probably with these situations, everyone knows who's the gangs. Everyone knows what families it is. Everyone knows what they do. But actually getting enough evidence to convict them can be a different matter. So best wishes to the police in doing that. I mean, behind this, what are the causes of this sort of thing? Well, I think family breakdown obviously is a very significant part of it. I think a general loss of moral standards as well, moral compass in society. Having said that, has there ever been a time when there weren't criminal gangs in operation? Well, probably not. This has always been a feature of, I think, any society that this is going to happen. But it does seem to be flaring up in Scotland. And I hope the police are extremely vigorous in trying to deal with it. And I hope that if it's the sort of situation where everybody with any sense knows who's done what and who's involved, but they can't quite convince the court, well, I hope that the courts are realistic and, people are brought to justice rather than getting away on technicalities or whatever. So, I hope we don't hear too many more of these stories. The thing with this gang violence as well is gangs draw more people in one way or another. I think especially young people. That is very concerning. So let's hope we see an end to that very soon. Right, sticking with the police. This was a little while ago now. There's a police force in England who quite openly said they didn't want applications, basically, from white applicants, or they were going to block them. So if you're white and you apply, then your application doesn't go forward. They let all the other ones go forward to see if they can fill the places, and then maybe they'll come back to the white people later on. Now, obviously, they're trying to get their police force to reflect the diversity in society, or whatever. But the thing with that is, even if you're someone who thinks that's a good thing, if there's 9% black people in Britain, we should in this city we want 9% of the police to be black, so we've got to rig the selection process and favor the black people, and that's what we need to do. Even if you think that, is it not obvious that this is going to backfire majorly? This is not some abstract game they're playing. This is young people in particular whose ambition is to join the police force. So you've got a young man or a young woman. I want to join the police. That's my ambition. That's really what I want to do. That's the career for life for me. So they apply, and then they find out they didn't actually have a chance because they were the wrong color. Now, how is that going to go down? You may find a small number would say, hey, that's absolutely fine. That's what social justice demands. If I have to give up my career so they can get more black people in the police, then so be it. That's fine by me. You may find a few people saying that, but an awful lot will just feel really, really aggrieved. And this is the formula to stoke racial tension. So even if you believe that that's the right goal for the police, it should be obvious that it's going to have really negative consequences in society. And I think that's what's happening, particularly for white young men. They're coming to realize as they go through life, they apply for courses, they apply for scholarships, they apply for internships, they apply for jobs. They just get the message slowly but surely that they're bottom of the pile. They're not special people. If they were a special person, they would particularly welcome their application, or they would find it just that bit easier to access the careers that they wanted. But they realize, what white male, well, I say you use bottom of the pile. And that's not going to end well. It's already not ending well. It's already not ending well. So, yeah, let's hope they come to their senses before too long. All right. Happy Easter. Can't comment on Facebook. Well, I'm not sure why that is. Other people are commenting on Facebook, so it does seem to be working for other people at least. Right now, to be honest, you probably haven't watched my marathon video on the emotional and psychological effects of abortion. It's about an hour and a half long. I did a significant amount of research from it, and I set out to basically try and answer the question: why is it that you get some people are saying, "Oh, the evidence says abortion doesn't do any harm, just women feel relieved, and it doesn't affect their mental health." Then you've got other people saying, "Well, the evidence is that it sure does, because there's hugely increased rates of all sorts of problems with women who've had an abortion." So I did this video on it. I found it really, really interesting. As I was making the video, I was thinking to myself, not many people are going to watch this. This is the other end of the spectrum from, like, communists tried to punch me in the streets type video. But I hope it's valuable, and I would urge you to go and watch it and have a listen to it. I thought after it, there was one thing I thought of after that would have been good to say. Because one of the key studies they talk about, people who try and claim that abortion doesn't really do much harm, is, well, the researchers they've tried comparing women who've had an abortion with women who haven't, and the women who've had an abortion come out much worse. Or women who've never been pregnant, or women who had an abortion. Women who've had an abortion come out far worse on lots of measures. So basically, they kept trying different control groups till they could try and find one where they can say, well, women who had an abortion, well, they sort of weren't any worse than this group. And the group they found, and that they claim that this is the case for, is women who wanted an abortion but were over the time limit and so were refused. Okay. Now, there's various problems with this research. One of them is only about a quarter of the women who were invited to take part in it actually took part. So it's worthless before we even start because of the selection bias. But then I thought another thing, which I didn't say in the video. If you've made the decision to have an abortion, but then that's denied, you've made the decision. So you then got a child that in the back of your mind that at one point you actually wanted to destroy this child. You wanted to prevent this child from existing. You wanted to kill this child, if you like. So that's a pretty heavy burden to bear. So for women who wanted an abortion and weren't allowed one, and women who had an abortion, well, women who wanted an abortion and weren't allowed one, well, no wonder they're messed up, because they'd made that decision. No wonder their emotional, psychological effects are quite severe, because they'd made the decision to have the abortion, and then were reminded of what a bad decision that would have been, what an immoral decision that would have been, because they're living with the child, that they weren't allowed to have the abortion. So do have a look at that video if you've got an hour and a half spare and you're interested in that sort of thing. Now, this is just a brief mention here. Obviously, assisted suicide's got through its first vote in the House of Commons. In Scotland, we have been waiting for years for the assisted suicide bill of Liam MacArthur to come into the Parliament. They tried years ago, was it 2015? Didn't get through. They tried before then as well. But Liam MacArthur's had this bill. It was introduced into the Parliament, again, years ago. And the campaigners have been sitting around waiting, thinking, is this ever going to happen? I mean, come on, if you're going to do it, get on with it. Let's have this debate. And the rumor was that he wasn't going to bring it forward until he was certain it was going to pass. And he didn't think it had necessarily got enough support. But is now saying, apparently, Liam MacArthur is now saying, apparently, that this is going to be brought forward very quickly. So there might be a vote in the Scottish Parliament, within weeks. I think they're saying middle of May was what the article was saying. So this might be on us very, very quickly. As I say, it's been debated in Scotland ad infinitum over the last few years, but it might be coming to the crunch. And it may be the case that the reason that's happening is that Liam MacArthur has done his sums. He's looked at his tally chart of people he's asked how they're going to vote, and he thinks he's over the line to get it passed. We shall see. We shall see. I think the campaign against assisted suicide in Scotland and in the UK has been brilliant, very effective, very professional, and I've been surprised how much traction it's gained. But the proof of the pudding will be in the eating, so we'll see what happens in the middle of May. If it actually happens, maybe it will be delayed again and it won't actually happen. So I think assisted suicide is an interesting issue in UK and Scottish politics. It's almost like being back in the olden days where it is genuinely a free vote. If you're in the Labour Party or Conservatives or SNP, you genuinely can vote either way, and it's not going to end your career. You're not going to be ostracized or called a something phobe because you voted for or against assisted suicide. So it is genuinely an open issue, which is unusual in the current climate. So we'll see which way that goes. Greens and the Lib Dems are basically for it. SNP and Labour, basically, that they've said, we'll make time for it, we'll allow it. So they're sort of leaning towards it. I think maybe the party leaders, I think if your ambition is to become the Prime Minister or to become the First Minister of Scotland or to continue as the First Minister of Scotland, maybe my advice to you would be sort of abstain from this. This is something you want to keep out of or vote against it. Say you're not quite convinced yet, because people's opinions will be very strong about it. And if you vote for it, I think you will alienate a substantial section of the electorate. So if you want to be the leader of your party or the leader of the nation, maybe that's not a good move. Maybe abstaining would be a better move. I look at people like Boris Johnson, anything contentious moral issues, abstain, 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 because they don't want it to undermine their position when they present themselves to the electorate as a party leader. So we might see a little bit of that going on. I maybe detected that already. So the party leaders are a bit reluctant to nail their colours to the mast. And maybe they'll end up voting no, but not voting no, saying, no, this is a bad idea on principle. But they'll say, oh, I'm not quite convinced. They haven't quite got me over the line on this one. So we'll see. Watch this space in any case. So, yeah, having waited for years, maybe this is going to be upon us before we know it. Now we're on to a bigger story now for this evening. I've got a bit to say about this. So Patrick Harvey warns of Green infighting. So apparently there's a problem of infighting within the Green Party. I really don't know what the topic of that is, what the bone of contention is. But anyway, I can't say I'm disappointed to hear about infighting in the Green Party. But Patrick Harvey's warning about the threat of the far right. When I would say the Green Party, the Scottish Green Party is a far left party. They're a far left party. If they were the government, you should be very worried indeed about, for example, religious freedom. I did a debate with Patrick Harvey years and years ago now, well before the Scottish Family Party. It was a panel discussion thing. I think, was it at the Humanist Society of Scotland or something, Secular Society? And I said to him during the event, I said, Patrick, do you think, I was a teacher at the time, I said, do you think I should be allowed to be a teacher? And his reply was basically, no, you shouldn't be. So yeah, it was quite chilling. And afterwards I said to him, I said, Patrick, I mean, are you not a sort of tolerance person? You don't like talk about tolerance a lot because it doesn't really come through in what you're saying. And what Patrick Harvey said is he said, no, we don't talk so much about tolerance anymore. We used to. We don't talk so much about tolerance. We talk more about equality now. So when you're a minority, you want to be tolerated, don't you? Oh, please put up with us. Please don't, but please let us speak. Let us have our voice, which is all fine. So you talk about tolerance, but then when they've got the power, it's not tolerance they want to talk about. It's equality. Equality translates into their agenda, their interpretation of equality. Yeah, so the Scottish Greens are a far left party. We'll hear a bit more about them later on. But Patrick Harvey's warning about the far right was related to this. Now, you've probably seen this. John Swiney has arranged this summit to combat the threat of the far right in Scotland. And he's been quite explicit that what he regards as the far right is the Reform Party. So he's invited all the parties in the Scottish Parliament, but he obviously hasn't invited Reform. And he has said, the far right threat he is trying to combat is Reform. Now, the Reform Party has got very weak moral foundations, to say the least. And they've got some pretty unsavory characters in it. And the way they speak about lots of issues, I think, is unhelpful, to say the least. So the Reform Party and the Family Party, we basically do not share the same fundamental values. So I'm no supporter of them in any way, shape, or form. But they're not a far-right party, not by any sort of sensible definition. The Reform Party is not a far-right party. If you listen to the way they speak about immigration, it's not like sort of hardline, hateful, stirring up hostility type rhetoric. Maybe Rupert Lowe, you might say, was a bit like that, but he's out of Reform now. So basically, there isn't if there is a far-right threat in Scotland, it's minuscule. It's maybe the Homeland Party or whatever else, or UKIP maybe even. So anyway, but Swiney's doing this. I think it's a total own goal. What he'll do is he will just energize Reform supporters. He will draw attention to them, and the whole thing will backfire on him. But the reason, there are two reasons actually. I want to know where this thing is. I've been trying to find out. I know when it is. It's in Glasgow, but I don't know the exact venue. I would quite like to go with a placard. I don't know how I'd have been able to fit all this on, because basically all the parties going, they'll be very smug and self-righteous. We're the good people. We, the good people, are going to have a big meeting about how we're going to stop the nasty people. And I'd just like to remind them that all these good people there at this event, they'll all be pro-abortion. I mean, Swiney himself supporting the corruption of young people with his degenerate sex education resources, but they'll be the smug, self-righteous ones. And the party they're criticizing, is also, doesn't uphold the sanctity of life with regard to assisted suicide or abortion, and a whole range of other significant moral issues as well, where they are at fault. But Swiney doesn't want to criticize them for those things. He wants to criticize them basically because they don't want open borders the way he does. But the headline here, Swiney tries to politicize the church. This is the bit I've got, one of the bits I've got a real problem with, because he's invited church leaders to it. So it's basically saying church leaders come along and join in with the Greens, Lib Dems, SNP and Labour, and it invited the Conservatives, come and join in with us in opposition to the Reform Party. Right. Where do we start? Well, will he get any church leaders to go? Sadly, yes. There'll be lots of church leaders from liberal churches in Scotland who will be queuing up to have a nice day out at the self-righteousness jamboree in Glasgow. There will be lots of church leaders who will want to go. But they shouldn't be there. They should not be there. Because what is the fundamental point of Christian principle that's at stake here? As I say, Swiney is open borders or pretty close to open borders. And the issue with reform is reform are more for reducing immigration. The Labour Party are also for reducing immigration. The Conservative Party want to reduce immigration. So it's just a matter of degree. So what fundamental moral principle John Swiney thinks divides these parties from reform, I'm not clear. But to invite church leaders into it, I think is complete. I guess fair enough for him to invite them. You're a politician. You try it on. If you can get people to come and align themselves with you, then okay, great. Why not try it? My criticism would be any church leader who goes to this. Now, if anyone goes saying, I'm going to influence it, I'm going to say something, I'm going to say something challenging, well, I look forward to hearing about it. Because my guess would be that even if some church leaders go along saying, I'm okay, I agree with you, but I'm going to speak up and say something and make a difference. Well, I look forward to hearing the reports of that. He said, to be honest, sarcastically, because I really think that is not going to happen. Yes, I guess my frustration there is that I think a lot of church leaders and maybe even denominations will speak out absolutely dogmatically on matters that are not clear issues of Christian principle, like immigration policy, for example. Then when it comes to issues that really are fundamental issues of Christian principle, like the value of human life, for example, then they've got nothing to say. And I think John Swiney is trying to capitalize on that. And sadly, I believe he probably will be successful in that. BNP are a far-right party. Yeah, so insignificant at this point in time. Yeah, absolutely, yeah. I say the Homeland Party are, I'd say that they wouldn't deny it, they're a genuinely far-right party as well. Just on the subject of the BNP, apparently the BNP had a policy. I tried to find this online. If I could find it online, I was going to make a video about it, but I couldn't find it online. But I heard it somewhere that once upon a time, the BNP's policy was that they were opposed to abortion for white people. It was okay for people of other races, but they were opposed to abortion for white people. And the question I was going to pose is that a better or worse policy than, for example, the policy of Reform or the SNP, or they're all the same, the current pro-abortion parties? Because that's actually a tricky philosophical issue, isn't it? So if you've got a party that's going to reduce the incidence of a terrible evil for a very bad reason, is that a worse party or a better party than a party that allows more widespread incidence of the grave evil? I think philosophically you could make the case that you'd rather have it's better to have a party that restricts killing, basically, even though they restrict it on the basis of an abhorrent reason. So I think you could make a case that the BNP's abortion policy then was more ethical than that of all the mainstream parties. So anyway, that's a little side issue. All races, ethnicities, and nationalities. Absolutely, yeah. That is, we would agree with that 100%. So back to John Swiney's Jamboree. What's been proposed as a stunt to divert attention from the SNP's woes? Absolutely. Will it work? Will it work? I just don't think it's going to work. I don't think it's going to work in any way, shape, or form. But the thing that gets me, I keep saying this, don't I? There's lots of things to get me, but maybe the fundamental one is just that we're on the moral high ground. So John Swiney, who promotes like vulgarity and degeneracy to the nation's children through sex education resources, he thinks he's on the moral high ground there. And he will spend that day, maybe I suggest, surrounded by church leaders as well. And his belief that he is secure on the moral high ground will probably be unchallenged. The media as well won't really challenge him. So if anyone can find out where this is taking place, I will be there outside one way or another, and let's see what's happened. Yes, I agree. Robert, happy Easter as well. Right, what else is... let's get that on. Oh, we visited the Sanford Clinic. This seems a while ago now, but we've missed a live stream, haven't we? So we went along. There's about a dozen of us, a few counter-protesters, lots of press photographers. I haven't seen any press coverage of it. So our tactic of holding events within buffer zones, because it got a lot of attention and media coverage, and got our placards in the newspapers and flying around on social media. So we did it again. It got a lot of attention from photographers. I'm not aware of any media coverage. The other thing that we were really pleased to be getting with these events was a response from Jillian Mai, because Jillian Mai was trying to pressurize the police to arrest us. The police, they wouldn't even reply to my email when I told them we were doing it. So the police obviously are not going to come and arrest us. So I think possibly we'll leave this for a little while. We'll see. We shall see. But the Sanford Clinic, surely it's time for us to make another visit on the other issue. Well, one of the other issues related to that. I mean, the Sanford Clinic's got the lot. 4,707 unborn lives lost in the last year we've got records for. That's a quite horrific number. The RSHPDOS got sex education resources are administered from this same building by the NHS now. And finally, it's the Centre for Transgender Treatments. Now, the treatments in inverted commas. Now, the transgender treatments for children, that's been reined in a little bit. But again, people maybe tend to think that, this battle's been won. Okay, puberty blockers. They stopped prescribing them apart from as part of an experiment. And last time we took a placard saying stop experimenting on children. But puberty blockers are now going to be given as part of an official trial, medical trial, an experiment. So it will be experimenting on children, which is totally wrong, because it's the underlying philosophy is what's wrong. The idea that you can make someone better by turning them from a boy into a girl or a girl into a boy, that's just wrong. So whether it's a placebo-controlled, double-blind, randomized trial or not, doesn't matter. It's unethical because it's based on a false ideology. So I'm feeling with the recent Supreme Court judgment that the time is ripe for us to go back to the Sanford Clinic on the trans issue. Because the Scottish Family Party policy is that there would be no transgender treatments at all. There will be no treatments that are designed to help someone through frankly, what's a delusion that they're actually of the opposite sex. So be that any sort of drug or surgery, this is including for adults, this just would not be available on the NHS at all. So we'll maybe be back there before too long. So what treatments should be available, I wouldn't call it treatments, to people who've got gender dysphoria, gender identity disorder, then what they receive is counselling and support like that. So counselling to help them to come to terms with their biological sex, basically, and to live as their biological sex. That's the help, the compassionate support that would most enable them to live the rest of their lives flourishing and happy. So that's what we would want the NHS to be offering, rather than these other, say, so-called treatments that are designed to reinforce a delusion. Yes, I've forgotten the day. I've forgotten the day because I don't know the place. If I knew the place, then I would be there. I just know Glasgow. So if anyone's got any tip-offs, I would be very interested to know whereabouts it is. Right. Now, the last time we went to the Sandiford, we so-called bricked it up. In other words, we put some cardboard boxes with brick wallpaper in the doorway there. And there were about 200 people counter-protesting. But I feel that the trans issue is really heated up again. So maybe it's time for us to go back, and maybe that would get some attention for us. I was interested when I was talking about getting attention. I mean, generally, if someone says, I just want to get attention, we tend to think that's like a sort of character flaw. Whatever. But when you're a small political party, then we want media coverage, we want attention, we want people to hear about us, we want people to see our message. Even aside from any political consideration, we want people to see the message. So like the Sanford Clinic there, all lives are as valuable as yours. We want that message to be circulated in the media and on social media. And the way you do it is you go and stand outside the Sanford Clinic, people take photographs of you, and then that gets circulated and more people see that. If I just went and stood in that back garden with that sign, not many people would see it at all. So when I say we just want to get attention, again, that might sound like a vice, but it's not. I mean, that's just what political parties do. Now, if you're a bigger political party, then you could have a meeting and say, right, what are we going to talk about this week? Let's talk about this issue, this issue, this issue, this issue. So you put out a couple of press releases and they get reported in the media. And then your person who's on debate night and question time this week, they get a chance to talk about some other issues as well. So no, you can choose what you want to talk about, and you're given a platform, and you could ask questions in Parliament. You could write a column in the newspaper, etc., etc. We don't have any of those things. We have to carve out, we have to mine from the solid rock. Any publicity that we're getting, any attention that we're getting is a struggle. We have to work hard for it, and this is an opportunity to get that sort of attention. And again, we'll be putting into practice our principle that we try and do things that are extremely mild. So, standing with a placard that says all lives are as valuable as yours. I mean, it's not exactly at the cutting edge of inflammatory, disruptive, illegal protest, is it? I mean, it's really very, very mild, but it creates a significant reaction. Same with the trans things. When we've got our placards, a man can't become a woman, simple. Again, very straightforward truth, but it provokes quite a severe reaction and therefore generates attention. So watch this space. We've got a leadership team meeting on Thursday. We'll maybe have a think about what we're going to do in that department. We shall see. Now, this was something I mentioned 2 or 3 weeks ago, and I put on social media as well. There's a bit of comment on social media, and there are a few people saying they didn't quite understand what I was saying, or they weren't quite on side with what I was saying. So I thought I'd just talk about it a little bit more to try to clarify. So this was a visit to the Georgian House in the New Town in Edinburgh, which I would recommend. National Trust for Scotland, very interesting property to visit. And the National Trust in England and Wales has had a terrible, self-inflicted terrible time because they've become very politicized. It's all full of race and LGBT and feminism and climate change or whatever. So a lot of people have been very unhappy with it. They say they don't want to go to a National Trust property. They want to go and see a stately home. They don't want to go to be preached to on various political issues that generally are the issues that left-wing parties emphasize. So that was a big controversy there. In Scotland, I just hadn't seen that at all. I'm a member of National Trust for Scotland. I phoned them up a few years ago and I said to them, by the way, if ever I see anything like this in your properties, then that's it. I'm cancelling my membership. And then there was nothing. But then this popped up. I've written to them. I put the letter on social media. I haven't had a reply from them yet. So I just wanted to explain a bit about it. Because someone commented on Facebook, this is, what's wrong with learning about slavery? Is it not an important thing to learn about slavery so we can learn lessons from it? Well, a few years ago, I went to America. We went to South Carolina, and we went to a plantation, and we saw the huts where the slaves lived. Had a look around the whole place, heard the story of the slaves. I got a book about American slavery, which I read. It's very interesting indeed. I've got this book as well, which was testimonies of people who were interviewed. I think it was in the 1930s. So they're basically very old people who could just about remember what it was like in the days of slavery. Really interesting, very, very interesting book. So I'll show you those. That's like my that's my case. That I'm as interested in these issues as anyone else. So it's a historical issue. Slavery, yeah, as interested in as any other. I'm fascinated to find out lessons to learn from it. I would say yes, but to be honest, I don't think it's particularly a live issue. I don't think there are many people who really need to learn the lesson that slavery is not. I mean, someone could jump in now and say, "Oh, there are more slaves in the world than there have ever been before." I don't know if that's true or not. Yeah, I mean, there are some people who live in conditions of slavery, including in Britain as well. But I don't think the issue is people don't realize it's wrong. Okay, I don't think it's an education issue. It's the same as people steal things. People break into houses and steal things from people. But the issue isn't that people don't realize it's wrong. The issue is people know full well it's wrong, but they're greedy and they'll do it in any case because they think they've got a decent chance of getting away with it. Goes to a different thing. So with slavery, is it an interesting aspect of history to study and to learn about? Absolutely. Is there a valid moral lesson in it? Well, yes, absolutely. Is that particularly applicable today? No, not well, maybe in some ways. But staying with the slavery issue, my problem is the reason it's been promoted here, along with these other issues, is it's going with a sort of left-wing ideology that you said, sort of neo-Marxist way of thinking, that there are inequalities between groups in societies. There's oppressors, there's oppressed groups. So in terms of race, the white people, they're the privileged ones. They're the sort of oppressors, the powerful ones. So they need bringing down a peg or two. And the oppressed people, well, the government's job is to give them special treatment to be able to lift them up. Then we can achieve equality. That's the same. Then same with women, same with LGBT, etc. So my issue isn't that they're taking an interest in slavery or trying to learn a lesson from it. My issue is more that they're trying to use it to feed a contemporary political ideology. So the issue of slavery, how relevant is that to anyone alive in Scotland today? And if you're a black person in Scotland today, I'm probably in the age of the transatlantic slave trade, your ancestors would probably have been in Africa. okay, or Caribbean, let's say Africa. So it may be that they were affected by slavery. Probably not. They probably weren't taken as slaves because they wouldn't have ended up in Britain. But there may have been people who caught other Africans and sold them into slavery, because that's the way it worked. So if you're trying to use it to reinforce any idea that like white people are bad or black people are victims or there's an injustice going on, well, that really doesn't make sense. Then if you look at white people, so white people's ancestors, I mean, my ancestors, 200 years ago, 300 years ago, how were they involved in the slave trade? I haven't got a clue. I don't know who they were. I don't know what they were doing. I mean, maybe they were at the forefront of the abolition movement and they were heroes. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe they were absolute villains. They're probably a mixture. I mean, the further back you trace your family tree, of course, I mean, it gets wider and wider and wider. You've got more and more ancestors, haven't you? So I've probably got ancestors who did all sorts of things. I don't know, some good, some bad. I don't know. But my objection is to be trying to look at the slavery issue and bring it as a black-white issue, basically to try and create racial tension or to use it to suggest that there's racial injustice from then that needs sorting out now. So therefore that backs up. I know I was saying about the police. So what the police are doing in a part of England where they're saying, white applicants, we don't really want you, then bringing up slavery in this regard to support that sort of agenda is not good. So how can I tell? How can I tell whether or not it's just, like me going to a slave plantation and buying some books and reading about it? How can I tell that that's sort of okay? But I go to this National Trust property and I see a thing about slavery, and I think that's not okay. So what's the difference? The difference is the motivation. If you look at those three leaflets together, then they're all tying up with issues that the sort of left-wing ideology known as social justice. They're all issues that come under that umbrella. And so I would see those three things together. I think that's obviously why they're being pushed. So you have women's issue. What about history? What about fathers' history? What about Catholic history? What about, I don't know, there's lots of different particular groups you could look at, and their history would be equally interesting. But when I see those three selected together, I think this is part of a political ideology, political agenda that's coming through. So hopefully that's made it clearer. Now, if people who made the comments on Facebook are not watching, well, they should be. So anyway, so hopefully that's made that clearer. Kids at local schools get made to go to the slave graveyard in Glasgow. Yeah, again, I would sort of have a problem with that because I was suspecting the motivation is to support the sort of white privileged critical race theory type political viewpoint. I would imagine that would be the motivation behind it. So I have a problem with that. Now, if I was at a school next to a slave graveyard, if I took a class to see it, because I'm just interested in that sort of thing, then I'd go and tell a bit of the story about it. I think that would be fine because I wouldn't be trying to tie it in and politicize it. But I would imagine the schools that are taken there, that's really explicit. If you were to watch the whole process of taking the children along, how it's presented to them while they're there, what they talk about when they're back in the classroom, I think it would be pretty apparent what's going on. The Arab slave trade, the Barbary pirates who actually kidnapped people from the south coast of England and took them away into slavery in the 18th century. Again, I was going to say not a lot of people know that. A lot of people do know it, but I would doubt you'd learn about it in school. Okay, what have we got next? This was interesting. BBC website. Now, when the BBC reports on home education, the tone is normally, who on earth are these weirdos who insist on harming their children by home educating them, despite the fact that there's a perfectly good school down the road that they could send them to? That's normally the tone of a report with the BBC. But then they came up with this: how to start home education in the UK, 5 simple steps. I think, whoa, what's going on here? Has the BBC had a change of heart? Then I thought, no, I think I know what's going on here. I think they're taking the harm reduction approach. In other words, so many parents are choosing to home educate. The last I heard it was something like 1% across England or whatever. Oh, that might have been Scotland. 1%. You might think, oh, that's tiny. That's actually a lot of kids. So if you're education policy, that's becoming a significant group. If that, increased 2-3%, that's considerable. So I think they're recognizing that actually a lot of people are doing this. And the BBC are maybe starting to think, well, we tried to stop it. We tried to discourage it, but it's not working. Lots of people are doing it. So let's try and reduce the harm caused to these poor children who have been deprived of school and educated by their amateur parents. Let's try and protect from the harm by trying to give these parents some proper expertise and proper advice from the BBC. Now, in a sense, is this a positive thing? I mean, in one way, it's a very positive thing. If the BBC are now saying, okay, giving the impression that home education is a valid choice and they're there to help home educating parents. On the other hand, I would imagine part of it as well is they might think, oh, some of these poor children, they're probably being brought up by those weirdo Christian parents, aren't they? Or Muslims or whatever. We don't want that. Well, oh no, sorry, they didn't mean to say that. Well, we hope that they get proper sex education, for example, and proper equality and diversity education and all the sort of politicized stuff. So the BBC, I think, will be hoping to have that input into home educated children. So we'll see. We'll see what they come up with for this. Richard looks at them more for race relations than anyone since Al Jolson. Well, I'm sure that's a compliment. Thank you very much. Okay, right. What have we got next? Right. This is maybe the biggest story this week. UK Supreme Court rules legal definition of woman is based on biological sex. Okay, that headline is true, but it's misleading. It's the legal definition within the Equality Act. Within the Equality Act, not more broadly. So it's not they've said, right, the word woman means biological sex, and that's the law. It's not that. It's saying within the Equality Act. So it's much more narrow than that. It's saying the definition of woman is biological sex. What's the significance of that? The Equality Act says that basically under certain circumstances that are not defined, you can have single sex spaces. And it's saying those single sex spaces, therefore, will be based on biological sex. So is that a win for common sense? Is that a win for the truth? Yes, it is. So this is a good thing. So well done for Women Scotland for bringing this forward. The Supreme Court, their judgment is not based on any view about the philosophy of transgenderism. All they've done is looked at the law and said, how can this law make sense if we include trans men, trans women in it? And so they're looking at it purely from a legal logic point of view. That's all that they were doing. And they've said basically the Equality Act wouldn't make sense in various ways if we allowed transgender people to be in that category. I listened to the whole judgment today. You can listen to it on YouTube. Another thing they were saying as well, was quite apparent, is whether you've got a gender recognition certificate or not, basically counts for nothing in the Equality Act. It seems like it. I mean, it all gets very confusing. So it's basically a win. But remember that this very same Equality Act also has provision protecting transgender people. So the Equality Act endorses the ideology of transgenderism by talking about transgender people as a real group of people. Okay, whereas I believe that isn't actually, someone might believe that they're a man or believe that they're a woman, but that actually doesn't have any grounds in reality whatsoever, and so that shouldn't be being acknowledged by the state in any way. But it still is in the very same Equality Act. It's almost as if you imagine we've got the whole of mathematics now, and someone said, "Oh, we've decided that the number 1 and the number 2 now are interchangeable. So wherever you see a 1, instead of a 1, it could be a 2. Wherever you see a 2, instead of a 2, it could be a 1. And that's a new rule in mathematics. That's what you've got to do from now on in maths. Someone might say, okay, right, fair enough. But then when you look at the implications of that, then so what's 1 plus 3 now? What's 1 plus 3? Well, the 1 could be a 2, so that could be 5. But the 3 is made up of a 2 and a 1. The 2 could be a 1 and the 1 could be a 2. But if the 2 could also be 2 1s. That's what it's like with this. Is you introduce a contradiction into a system, and then that contradiction has consequences throughout the chains of reasoning that lead from it. They lead to all sorts of other contradictions and tangles. And then if you try and sort out one of them, okay, you might sort of be able to sort out one, but in sorting out one, you create another one. So that's the situation here. So the fundamental issue that there's man can't become a woman can't become a man. The idea of a gender recognition certificate is just wrong. The idea that there's such a concept as a transgender person just isn't true. There can be a person who thinks they're a man, thinks they're a woman, to actually suggest that they are some sort of man or a woman is just not true. So still the heart of the matter remains. And it's interesting, particularly in Scotland, to see the pushback. So politicians, the whole public services in general are infused with this ideology, and a massive part of the media. So this is not going away anytime soon. And I just hope that the discussion moves to the heart of the matter now. The single-sex spaces, female sports, that side, this victory will make a difference for those. It will make it easier for organizations to say, no, we don't want men and women's sports. It doesn't mean that they have to say that. It will make it easier for them if they do want to say that. They might not want to, but if they do want to, this will make it easier for them. So I think in terms of those issues, the issues that the feminists have been campaigning on, I think this is quite a significant step forward. But the issue that we're more concerned about, which is basically confusing young people by presenting this as a life choice, normal, natural, healthy life choice to them, which is, I think, is a far more serious issue, then there's still a long, long way to go with that. Right, a few follow-on things from this. That's from the Family Education Trust. Chest feeders, bleeders, menstruators, cervix havers, uterus havers, birthing parents, cis woman, these terms have to go. Bring back sex-based language. Absolutely, that's in line with what we said, just a whole lot needs to go. There's no point trying to just fix one little bit, because that will just create more contradictions. Because say the Gender Recognition Act 2004 needs to go, and the very idea that you can choose to be male or female, to be a man or a woman, just needs to be dismissed. It needs to be argued against and dismissed. And that's not a matter of law necessarily. That's a matter of a cultural belief within our society, and it needs to go. And this has been an interesting spin-off story. I mean, Maggie Chapman, MSP, is a very unusual character. Let's put it that way, a very unusual character who holds some very extreme views. So she was speaking at a rally of transgender persons, and she absolutely railed against the Supreme Court and said they were bigots and called them everything under the sun, which are totally unjustified. Even from her perspective, it was totally unreasonable, because all the Supreme Court did was try and work out how the Equality Act could possibly make sense and be consistent with itself. That's all they did. They didn't make any judgment at all about whether there's such a thing as a trans person, anything like that. They just tried to come to a decision that enabled the law to make sense. Anyway, so she called them everything under the sun. And the Faculty of Advocates now, legal body in Scotland, demands an apology because they're saying she's undermining the independence of the judiciary. So politicians shouldn't criticize the decisions of the Supreme Court, for example, because the idea is that you should respect these decisions. So Maggie Chapman's a politician. So if she doesn't like the Supreme Court's judgment, what she should do is bring forward another law that enacts her beliefs. Okay, which is quite right. I suppose that's quite understandable. If she wants a version of the Equality Act that fits in with what she says, then okay, the Greens should try and introduce one in the Parliament and see how that goes. They've actually called for it to even consider resigning as an MSP. They've seen this as a very, very grave issue. Now, John Swiney said the right thing. John Swiney said, I respect the rule of law. But he also said, thought this is a very difficult day for trans people. I mean, John Swiney doesn't know what he believes. Does he believe anything? On the one hand, he knows his party's split on this. He knows if he comes across as a bit too sensible, then he'll lose people to the Green Party. And if he comes across as a bit too fashionable on it, or too much in line with trans ideology, he'll lose people to Alba. And he'll lose the electorate, basically, to some degree. So John Swiney, his personal thoughts, if he has any, which I don't really think he does, don't come into it at all. It's just a matter of electoral calculus. But yeah, Maggie Chapman's landed herself in some hot water there. And finally, sadly, of course, we heard that the Pope passed away this week. Tributes being paid in the Scottish Parliament. Now, we think it's quite right. Obviously, a figure of such prominence and such an important religious leader in the world is quite right. They should be paying tributes. I think the media coverage, it's always interesting when you see media coverage related to the church in general or to the Catholic Church. It really becomes apparent the low level of understanding of Christianity or religious belief in general. But obviously, we were sorry to hear that. I've retweeted Pope Francis on several occasions in my capacity as leader of the Scottish Family Party when he's made some great comments on issues that lined up with our policies. So we've really appreciated that. Now, talking about media coverage, I mean, this is absolute rubbish in the Daily Express here. An English club has won the European Cup at the end of the football season in which each of the last three popes has died. Coincidence or divine intervention? You think, is this April the 1st they put this in? I mean, what absolute garbage they put in the Daily Express. I mean, that's unbelievable. I mean, would you say that's even... I wouldn't necessarily say it was disrespectful, but dear, oh dear, why ever are they printing something like that? I mean, that's an example, if you're interested, of the Texas sharpshooter fallacy, which is the idea that you have someone who can't really shoot straight, and you stand him in front of a barn and give him some guns, lots of ammunition, and he just blasts away at random at the barn door. Then afterwards, where there's a little cluster of shots that happen to have gone together, you paint a target around them, and then say, "Oh, look how he did there. He got those really close on the target." But the point is that to decide if he's a good shooter or not, you've got to paint the target on the barn before he starts shooting. Whereas this is a classic example where no one came up with a theory. I think an English team will win the European Cup every time we have a new pope. So let's test this theory over the next 50 years, shall we? No one did that. They took the data first and then tried to notice the coincidences in it, which is the formula for just finding nonsense, sharpshooter fallacy, Texas sharpshooter fallacy. So Daily Express, I was astonished to read that. Just staying on the issue of the new pope as well, there was an article on the BBC website about the people who are touted as possible successors. I always get the impression that I read them that people don't really have much to go on. So I think there's a lot of wild speculation. But it was fascinating reading the BBC comments on one of them. I mean, one of them, they said, for example, basically he's pro-life. So that this is news, or this might be something that distinguishes him from the other potential popes or something. I mean, it's really, but it's really quite bizarre reading it. Quite astonishing. Okay, let's. Right, meetings coming up. Well, we're going to have a lot more meetings going into the diary before too long. But Stirling, 7th of May, that's not too far away. That's in the Wetherspoons in Stirling. I can mention Wetherspoons because we never get cancelled at Wetherspoons. So, yeah, what's it called in Stirling? The Cross Peels, is it? Yeah, 7th of May. We're having a meeting in Falkirk. I think that's at the beginning of June. We'll get that on social media soon. And we're going to have quite a few more meetings around the place in May and June as well. Right, time is marching on. No, the Talmud. I'll mention it quickly because it's in the title. Someone was asking about the Talmud a while ago. The Talmud is a massive collection of literature that's regarded as fundamental text for contemporary Judaism. And it's also quoted by some people in order to promote anti-Semitic viewpoints. So someone asked me what I thought about the Talmud, and the person who asked me on the live stream was probably someone who was attracted to the to using it as fuel for anti-Semitism. But there's a few things to remember with the Talmud. For a start, a lot of it is in the form of debates. So something you read, a sentence you read in the Talmud is not the teachings of Judaism. It's something that a person said in a debate. And the debate, one person might be recorded saying that, and another person might say the complete opposite. And maybe the discussion goes round in circles and it arrives at some compromise, or it doesn't, or it's left an open question or whatever. So you can take sentences out of the Talmud, but they do not reflect teaching. It's conversation within it. So that's one thing. Another thing to remember with the Talmud is some of it was written at times of very intense persecution of the Jews, including by Christians. So if there was some anti-Christian feeling there, or a desire to diminish Christian beliefs, that's sort of understandable under the circumstances. But again, some of the passages from the Talmud that people say this is, for example, about Jesus, is demeaning to Jesus. It's not even necessarily clear that it was about Jesus. It possibly was, possibly wasn't. But the main thing to say about it, as I say, is it is not like the Quran. Muslims believe that everything in the Quran was like the words from Allah, and you can take any sentence out of it and you've got your meaning there. That's what Allah's got to say. The Talmud is not like that. As I say, it's discussion, it's conversation, contradictory viewpoints brought forward in opposition to each other, and out of the debate, the hope is the truth emerges, then commentators come in and analyze it, and hope that wisdom comes out of it. So that's my brief take on the Talmud. So when people quote it in a way that's basically saying, look, the Talmud shows just how bad Jews are, just how bad Judaism is, and just how dangerous it is, I don't think that's valid. I don't think it's valid. But there are things in the Talmud that at face value, you could say seem very anti-Christian. At face value, I think often it can't be taken at face value, or there's another side expressed in the Talmud, or you might be able to say, well, it's understandable at the time. But if you look at the different religions, you could say within the Christian Bible, the Old Testament in particular, there's some quite harsh things about some of the other religions around the surrounding area and tribes around in the surrounding area. In Islam, I think there are some quite harsh things about Christians and Jews. That's for sure. Then the Talmud sort of coming after Christianity as well, and says some things critical of Christianity. Okay, but I think trying to build the case, any sort of anti-Semitic case on that, is entirely invalid. Right, I will leave it there. I think I've got another couple of stories, but time has marched on. So thank you for joining me this evening. I'll be back in action this week. I'll put out a couple of videos on different topics. Keep your eye open to see if we're going to go along to the Sanford Clinic at some point. And hope to see you soon. Right, good night.